Hi, this is Heather Hurt. Welcome to my Moon Journal project. For this project, I decided to lay it out in a website format because I thought that would be the easiest way for anyone who wanted to use this to access all of the information. So the way I presented my project was more for teachers to be able to implement it in their classrooms, not necessarily for me to just like assign to my students. So I'm going to kind of go through each step of the project and show you what I did. So when you come to the website, this is the first thing that you see. And I'm basically just kind of welcoming you to the website and letting you know what it is that you're going to be seeing. All right, so we're going to jump on over to the project overview. So here, I just kind of talk about why I chose this project. When I teach science in the fourth grade, my absolute favorite unit to do is space. I feel like I get the most impressive kind of questioning and thoughts out of my children over any of the other units that we do throughout the year. I love space and I'm fascinated by it. And I think that because of that passion, I actually do a better job teaching this unit than some of the other ones. But one of the things that I have learned through this course and this project is that there's actually a lot of misconceptions out there about the moon and its phases. And so I kind of used those as a guide for this project because I wanted to help other teachers kind of understand why the phases occur the way that they do so that they can better teach their students. So the next page that we're going to go to is using this project in your classroom. So this kind of goes in a little bit to what those I was talking about with those misconceptions. In fourth grade, teachers are responsible for teaching the 8 phases of the moon. So we're moving past just new and first quarter, full, and last quarter, but now we're adding in the waxing, the waning, crescent, and gibbous, all of those vocabulary words. And so we're definitely going more in depth than the things that they would get maybe in like second grade. And not only are the students responsible for this vocabulary, but they also need to be able to look at the moon at any point in a month and be able to determine what phase the moon is in. They also need to be able to explain that this occurs because of the sunlight reflecting off the moon. I think a lot of times children think that the moon is its own light source, and that is something that we have to teach them. And so in this website, not only do I show you the moon journal that I did myself, that I actually have done in my classroom in the past, but I also add some resources and the lesson plan that we made, just that teachers have more material available for them so that they are teaching this lesson with fidelity. The next section of my project is my resource section. So I broke it up into 3 categories. I found some research-based articles that talk about those misconceptions with student teachers when they're first starting out their careers, and then also things about how fourth graders learn about the moon phases. And then I found some NST articles that one in particular that I'm going to talk about in just a few minutes was completely mind blowing for me. And then finally, I found some really fun web resources and some videos and things like that that you could actually show in your classroom to kind of help supplement your teaching. So for the research-based articles, the first one I found was pre-service primary teachers, ideas about lunar phases. And again, what this article did was it talked to 154 student teachers, and they were just basically asked, why does the moon look different throughout the month? And only 54% of the student teachers knew that the lunar phases were like scientific and like knew the actual scientific reasons behind that, and that blew my mind because that means that over half of these adults who are getting ready to start their teaching career do not even understand the basics of our moon and yet are going to be responsible for teaching it. So that was really eye-opening for me, but it also wasn't too surprising because I feel like a lot of professional development kind of skips over science and social studies because they are not seen often as those crucial content areas. You know, we have more of a focus on math and on reading. And so this article, I feel like, is a really good tool to kind of get out there and really push for better professional development in those other content areas. The second article that I talked to you about is titled Fourth Grade Elementary Students Conceptions of Standard-Based Lunar Concepts. So this article showed how fourth graders understood more scientifically the phases of the moon before and after specialized instruction. So the students were kind of done the same as the student teachers. They were like asked about the moon phases just straight off the bat, almost kind of like a pretest. And then they did a whole bunch of activities, including a 9-week moon journal, and then working with peers to compare their findings. They did an activity in a darkened room in the light source, and they kind of moved around to kind of mimic the moon's phases. So they got to do a lot more hands-on and in-depth work with those moon phases. And then they were asked again about the phases of the moon, and their scores like went through the roof. So it really shows that if you are giving them the correct information and teaching it in a way that is meaningful to them, they're going to learn it. And then maybe we won't have as many teachers later on down the line going into their career and not knowing how to teach things properly. For the NSTA articles, I'm gonna not talk about this first one first because that's the one that was so amazing to me. But the second one I found was an article titled Teaching Through Trade Books, Moon Phases and Models. And so here it just shows you 2 trade books, Phases of the Moon and the Moon Book, which are books that are accessible to anybody, and how you can incorporate them into elementary classrooms to help teach the phases. It gave lessons that were geared around the 5E cycle for both kindergarten through 3rd grade and 4th through 6th. And so essentially it kind of also shows how, you know, as children move through elementary school, those science standards build upon each other and get deeper and deeper because the projects in these lessons from kindergarten through 3rd to 4th through 6th are kind of doing the same thing, but they're deeper so that, you know, when they get to that older age and that secondary project, they're going to be able to use the knowledge they had gained when they did the project in the earlier years to help them understand it even better. So I really liked that article, and I really liked that it gave some really good resources for teachers. But this article right here, the moon phases and the self shadow, let me just tell you that when I read this article, I was blown away because I had never heard of a self shadow before. And once I read it, I was like, oh, duh, like I actually knew what a self shadow was, but I just never had heard that term before. And this article does such an amazing job of telling you why we actually see the phases of the moon the way that we do. And it's because of that self shadow that is being created on the moon with the sunlight. And it goes into detail about how if you weren't on Earth looking at the moon, you would see the phases differently or not even see them at all. So this article is amazing for teachers to read if they are struggling with understanding the phases. But I think this could even be a really good article to give to your students, maybe ones who are a little bit of a higher level, and let them kind of also gain that information. Because I'm telling you, it was such a fun and just almost like exciting article to read because I learned so much more about it. And like I said, I'm already passionate about space. And so to read that, just, it really did blow my mind. All right. And then finally, for my other web resources, I talked about the NSTA science objects. I've done a few of these throughout the course of this semester, and I'm really excited to bring them into my classroom. And there is one science object that I think could tie in well with this whole like moon unit, and it is titled Earth, Sun, and Moon, Motions of the Moon. So it teaches the students all about the phases of the moon, solar and lunar eclipses. It uses really rich science vocabulary to help them build that understanding more. It includes fun interactive pieces. It suggests hands-on activities. And even though it is a little bit higher level as far as like reading goes, the entire thing can be read aloud. So all levels of learners can actually go through this. So I'm really excited for this to be done in my classroom. Another link that I found sends you to a list of songs and activities and even a couple of videos just to help bring some more fun and engaging ways to teach the moon phases into your classroom. A lot of these stations can be used as hand-on stations. A lot of these activities can be used as hands-on stations for your students. And my personal favorite was the moon phases board where the student's head literally goes inside like a poster board, and then there's like foam balls painted around it with the different phases on it, and the children actually move around to see the different phases. I could just imagine my students in my classroom doing this project and they would love it. The last link that I put is sent you to Generation Genius, and it is a great resource, honestly, for teaching a lot of topics, but they have a really good video on the moon phases. It's really engaging. It does a great job of explaining the topic. And then it includes a teacher guide, reading passages, discussion questions, an activity, and even an assessment. So, if space and the moon are not really your cup of tea, this is a really good resource for you to make sure you're getting that information that your students need to have. Because, like I mentioned before, social studies and science can sometimes be those topics that are a little quote unquote forgotten about. There are some great ways that you can integrate space into other content areas. So you could use it in math by taking their moon journal and graphing the results or coming up with word problems. You can do an informational writing piece where they could research information about the moon and create a report. In reading, using nonfiction stories is always really important, especially in fourth grade. And there are so many great books out there about the moon that are nonfiction that you could put in your classroom. I found 2 examples for you. The moon seems to change, and so that's how the moon changes shape. So these are 2 trade books that are nonfiction that you could use like in a guided reading lesson. And then I also found a really cute fictional storybook called A Big Moon Cake for a Little Star. And it's about, excuse me, a cake that's shaped at a moon, and a little girl keeps eating it, and as she's eating it, you see all the different phases. So it's a really just a cute, fun way to kind of do like a read aloud in your classroom that's also teaching them about the moon phases. Okay. So for educational theory, I thought that for my project in this kind of like unit, that inquiry-based project learning would be the best theory for this one. Like when teaching about the moon or space in general, my students come up with just some really amazing questions. And so this would be a great opportunity to put the learning into their own hands. And so, I would want them to do projects and do research and kind of come up with the answers of their questions on their own instead of me just telling them, because I feel like it really does help deepen their learning. Okay, and then I put my lesson plan that I wrote earlier in the semester on my webpage, and essentially they are making a moon model by painting and painting some paper plates to create the different phases and working with groups to kind of figure out which phase they're doing, and then putting them in the correct order. So this is there for you, and it's written in the 5E cycle so that you know exactly how the lesson plan is going to be touching all of those areas. Okay, then I put the example of my completed moon journal. So I actually just found this from NASA. This is very similar to one that I do in my classroom. And I chose the month of March to observe the moon. So essentially what I did was I set a daily alarm for 8 p.m. every day, and weather permitting, I went outside and looked. Now, the weather did not permit actually a lot in the month of March. And so I used the Farmer's Almanac webpage to help supplement for those nights. But there are other websites that, teachers could use, but that would be the one that I would suggest. So what I did was I went ahead and showed on my moon journal what the moon looked like or should have looked like every single night for the month of March. and then I, listed the different phases. I have